gentlemen, please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a short invocation. Are we ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you asking for guidance, wisdom, and love. Please protect our community and keep everyone safe. Amen.
Amen.
Roll call.
Ms. Lees?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Here.
Mr. Bryant?
Ken has vertigo still, so I think he will not be able to make the meeting. I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Ms. Lees?
Aye. I move approval of the minutes. We don't have any. Fiscal officers report we do not have. Presentations we do not have. Public hearing we do not have. Old business we do not have. New business. I move approval of resolution G 2022-25. Let me write this down. A resolution authorizing a text amendment to Section 31 definitions, Section 51 general provinces, provisions, Section 137EE planned residential district, Section 143.2 shared parking, Section 146 outdoor lighting, Section 171 additional use, height and area regulation and exceptions, Section 320.4 variable message centers, Section 321.4 wall signs, Section 321.5 variable message center, and Section 351 detached garage storage structures and other detached structures of Symmes Township zoning and resolution, and dispensing with the second reading.
Second.
Discussion.
Okay, so we talked about all of these text amendments at our January 18th work session. However, we did add two sections that we have not previously discussed, and that would be Section 31 definitions, where we added a definition for short-term rentals, and under Section 51, under the general provisions, where we now are seeking to prohibit short-term rentals. So I'll let Jeff explain where we are and why we're here in the process.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I assumed everybody out here was here you wanted to hear about the variable message sign changes?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay.
That's a legal joke.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Okay. So there are really two things I think would be helpful. One is to talk just for a second about what's in this resolution. These are two text amendments related to short-term rentals. And like I said, there are two provisions here. One is the definition of short-term rental. That proved to be the issue that we had to deal with last night at BZA, because our code currently does not have a definition for short-term rental. So we're proposing to add that definition. And then the second part is now that we will have defined what a short-term rental is, then we are providing some more guidance to say that short-term rentals essentially shall not be permitted in any residence district. So that's what this text amendment is about. This text amendment, this is the first process that we have to follow to do a text amendment. It's initiated here by the trustees. It will go to the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission for a discussion and a recommendation. That will come back to the township, to our zoning commission. Our zoning commission will have a public hearing, and the zoning commission will make a recommendation that will come back to this board. This board will also have a public hearing, and the public will have an opportunity to weigh in however they would like on that. And ultimately, just like any other text amendment, this board has the ultimate authority to make those amendments. You can, and I should say, through this process that I just explained, it's not common that there might be some tweaks and changes here and there to any of these provisions. Regional planning can look at it and say, this looks good, but we would suggest that you maybe make this modification. Same thing can happen at zoning commission, and then ultimately it comes back here. You can listen to those recommendations. This board has the authority to hear those recommendations, but just stick with what your initial thought was. So my point is, there is a very set forth process that we have to follow that involves the public at least 2 opportunities before any change would be made to the code. So that's what this is about. It might be helpful, if you don't mind, if I have a few minutes just to talk about last night, what led to last night, and the process that is involved there. Like I mentioned, one of the text amendments we're proposing is to define short-term rental and then place some regulations on it. And that was the problem that we had that led to the administrative appeal heard at the BZA last night, because our code didn't define short-term rental. So when some complaints were heard, the zoning department went at it, they saw what was happening, they did some research, they realized what was happening, they came to a conclusion that in that particular case, the short-term rental that was being used did not fit the definition of single-family residential. But what we had to do at the administrative level is then say, we have to make an interpretation under our code and say, since we don't define short-term rental, we have to figure out what is it most like in our existing code, because we only have the ability to regulate things based on our code. So through some discussions, some additional research, the zoning administrator made the interpretation that we would treat short-term rentals like a bed and breakfast. And a bed and breakfast and it is defined, it has its own process of how to get approved. It's what's called a conditional use. And so that was the interpretation made by the zoning administrator. That was provided to the property owner, and well within their rights, this is exactly how the process is meant to work, they disagreed with that interpretation, and they were able to file what's called an administrative appeal, and by our code, the BZA. And so that's what we had last night. And I think everybody was here.
And that had to be heard by the BZA.
Yes, that. The interpretation that hears that appeal, the Board of Zoning. So that's what we did last night. The role in that kind of an appeal. They conduct a hearing, they hear evidence, they hear testimony, they hear arguments from the attorneys, they took public comment, and then based on everything that they've heard, they have, and this is not just about last night's case, this is in any administrative appeal. The BZA has essentially 3 options of what to do. The BZA can affirm the interpretation of the zoning administrator, and this to affirm that we're going to treat short-term rentals like a bed and breakfast. They can reject or deny the interpretation. In that case, that would be saying, we disagree, short-term rentals are not like bed and breakfasts, but of provide designation of how we term rental. The third option, and this is right in the code, so I want everyone to understand this is exactly what the BZA is permitted and supposed to do. The third option is to modify the interpretation of the zoning administrator.
And can you define code real fast so they understand?
I'm talking about the Symmes Township zoning resolution, which is available, I bet everybody out there has it, but it's available online.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, so when I say code,
We're
that's just,
clear.
I'm talking about the zoning resolution, which, as we've said before, is ultimately adopted and amended by the Board of Trustees. That third option is to modify the interpretation of the administrator, and in that case, the BZA, and I think, by the way, that Brian Snyder from Hamilton County did a really great job of explaining this part. When you do that, if the BZA is going to modify, the BZA is essentially stepping into the shoes of the zoning administrator and saying, based on the code, we disagree with your interpretation, we're going to modify it because we think, based on the code, based on the evidence and the testimony that we've heard, we think the correct interpretation would be whatever they come up with. In this case, that's what the BZA did last night. They chose to modify the interpretation of the zoning administrator, and they did so by saying that short-term rentals will be treated or considered under the use category of hotel motel for purposes of zoning administration. So whereas the initial determination had said, we're going to treat them like bed and breakfast, the BZA heard all the evidence and the testimony, and they said, no, we think the more appropriate interpretation is to treat them like hotel motel. And so that was the decision that came from the BZA last night.
Okay.
So questions, or does that kind of cover it? There is, that continue.
Right, can I clarify? So what's the difference between hotel and bed and breakfast, so they understand?
They are two defined terms in the zoning resolution. The zoning resolution defines bed and breakfast, and I probably have it here somewhere,
You have
but
to live on the property.
live on the property. It's only a certain number of rooms, no access to kitchen facilities.
Signage, parking.
Yeah, has other signage requirements, parking requirements. Hotel motel is a use that is separately defined under our zoning resolution, and it has a different definition. It has a different number of rooms. It talks about renting, or not renting them, but using them for a fee. I probably have it here somewhere, but the specifics are that the BZA heard everything, had the code in front, and reached a conclusion, and I'm pretty sure a unanimous conclusion. I think it was 5-0 vote that said we think it was more appropriately treated as a hotel motel use.
Okay. And hotel motel is zoned?
Well, hotel motel use is only permitted in, I believe, the O district and the E district. And it's not a conditional use. If you own a property in the O district or E district and you want to operate a hotel motel, you just come in, you get the zoning certificate, and you can do it. There's no hearing for it. There's no additional application for it. It's different. And in this case, based on what the BZA said, that would include short-term rentals, can only be used in the O and E districts. Put my,
I know.
a hotel or motel is a building containing more than 4 individual rooms for the purpose of providing, for periods not exceeding 30 days, overnight lodging facilities to the general public for compensation with or without meals, and which has common facilities for reservations and cleaning services, combined utilities, and on-site management and reception. So that was the determination that was made by BZA last night, and that's how we will proceed until some other body tells us otherwise.
So for a property that is intended to be an Airbnb in Symmes Township, as of today, does that mean, based on the ruling last night, that that is forbidden? Or are we in a gray area, or do we need
We are, so,
we need to issue like a stay or?
well,
some-
so the BZA issued their decision last night.
Mhm.
The actual written decision, I think 7 days or so. So until the owner receives the written decision, we're in a bit of a gray area right now. And I say that because once they receive the written decision, they have the ability to file an appeal of that decision. That appeal is based on state law, so it sort of takes it out of our zoning resolution into the state law. State law says they have 30 days to file that appeal.
And while they file that appeal, can they operate?
Yes.
And once they file the appeal and it goes to the common pleas court, during the process, will they be able to operate?
Yes.
And so we have a handful of these properties today. Do they all have to file their own appeal, or do they
No.
work
File
together?
Class action?
No.
No.
No, this is only specific to this particular this particular case. Any other, and BZA, which will be, and then we have this text amendment process that is being at least proposed to be initiated tonight. So for now, any existing short-term rental facility may be able to continue operating until, and then we have to go through this text amendment process to set some new rules in the code. Even after we do that, existing ones will be considered a legal, non-conforming use. So they were in use prior to the zone change. It's what we commonly call being grandfathered in. They would be able to continue that. The burden is on the property owner to demonstrate that they were already in business, already operating under that before the zone change happens. But the other issue is, if the decision of the BZA is appealed, as we anticipate that it will, that does basically put a stay on the BZA's decision. Even though the BZA it really is a question that would apply to the code as a whole, applies to all the properties as a whole. So while that decision is being appealed, we can't enforce it until we have a final determination from the court.
And I won't hold you to this, but can you give me some rough idea, how long will it take to get a final determination from the court?
Could be 9 to 12.
Yeah, I mean, 6 months, 9 months, a year. I can tell you some of the specifics of it to give you an idea, but it's in control of the court that we can't control. The decision was last night. They have 30 days to their month. Once they file the appeal, the township has 45 days to prepare the transcript and the record and submit that to the court. We will, of course, try to do that faster, but, that's a job. Somebody is going to have to pull the video of that and transcribe it. So We file that. Then the court will set it for an initial case management conference. We'll go to that. And then and in this case, in Hamilton County, I just want people to be prepared for this. I believe every judge in Hamilton County, with the exception of maybe one, and then once it's briefed, the magistrate will likely set it for what's called an oral argument, where the attorneys will come in and argue the case. And then once we do that, I can't predict at all how many, it could take months for the magistrate to issue a decision. And then without getting too much in the weeds on this, when a decision comes from a magistrate, that's not necessarily a final order. You can file objections to that then goes to the judge, which could kind of start the process over again and add more months to that. So I don't want anyone to think that administrative appeal is fast. We will do everything we can moving as quickly as possible, but once it's in the system, control.
This level, some existing law from other jurisdictions. Do you know?
On the question of short-term rentals?
Yes.
I'm not aware of any other cases that in Hamilton County that have gone to that. I mean, many jurisdictions are probably in the same spot that you were in, where they don't have any regulations about short-term rentals.
The state does not have any regulations.
The state of Ohio does not regulate short-term rentals in the way that we're talking about. Some communities have just started introducing regulations for short-term rentals, and as far as I know, I'm not aware of any of them that have been challenged in court. So, I mean, this could be a sort of a question of first impression for whichever judge is assigned to the case. But that being said, all the judges in Hamilton County are very familiar with how to handle zoning administrative appeals. May not be the specifics of this particular case, but they all know how to handle this type of case.
Mm-hmm. I just had one last question.
Sure.
I know back when we were thinking it was going to go in the direction of bed and breakfast, there was a secondary conversation about the need for a conditional use permit for that usage. So that's gone to the side, but now we're talking hotel motel. Does someone do they need a conditional use permit to operate a short-term rental?
Well, they're not permitted to be in a residential district.
So it automatically would exclude every neighborhood out there that's zoned A.
Right.
B, C, D.
Right, and you can't get, I guess maybe I misunderstood. You can't then get a conditional use to operate a hotel or motel in a residential district. That's not one of the allowed conditional uses.
Okay.
And so if you wanted to, if this determination of the BZA were withheld, or affirmed, then essentially what we'd have to do is any short-term rental that we're aware of that's in a residential district, we would send them a notice of violation that says you're operating what we consider to be a hotel motel use. Those are only permitted in the O district and the E district. You're in whatever, A, B, C, D. it's not permitted. You have to cease the operation.
So the zoning appeals board last night, they took a really strong stance. They did a
Yes.
nice job.
Yes.
They did exactly what the BZA is authorized to do.
Good for them. Okay.
Yeah, and I guess last thing I would say is, I just wanted to point out, I thought what a good job that the BZA did. I do this all over the place, I do this in a lot of communities, and I can tell you,
How many communities do they have?
well, I represent 5 different political
And
subdivisions,
how long have you been doing this?
20 years.
So
I've
you've seen it
also,
all.
yeah, and I've also represented, in the communities where I'm not the law director, I've represented property owners on zoning appeals, and I've appeared before BZAs. Yes, I've done it. And I can tell you, one of the chief complaints you will hear from time to time is that BZAs do nothing but rubber stamp what the administrator says. And I want to be clear, that is not the case with this Board of Zoning Appeals. They could have easily walked in and said, we don't need to hear anything, we read your staff report, sounds good to us. They didn't do that. They conducted a good, thorough hearing. They heard from the property owner, they heard from staff, they heard from a number of residents. They deliberated on the issue for quite some time and reached their own determination based on everything that they heard.
Because-
So I think that deserves some
Right,
some
because of
credit.
Brian, he had a different idea. They came to a different conclusion than
Right.
what Brian recommended.
Yep. And but that's exactly what the code allows for.
And the process.
In the process, yeah, absolutely. Okay?
Okay. So I'm going to take this time to do hearing from the public. So if anybody would like to make a comment, please stand up, just say your name and address. But before we do that, I do just want to thank the Zoning Appeals Board because I think you did an excellent job.
Yes, second that.
Okay.
Well, I share a lot of what your attorney just said. I want to express 2 thoughts. One is let you know what we heard from the public last night, because not as much of them showed up tonight as did last night and had a lot to say. So I want to share a little bit of that at the end. Partially what I want to share is a little bit of a complaint. I think your staff overreached their authority. That's a personal opinion. That's not an opinion of the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's just my personal view. I felt that the interpretation of the zone, there's zoning code, zoning resolution, zoning ordinance terms that are so commonly used. Ours is a resolution. I find it, like he does, difficult to say resolution when I'm thinking code or ordinance. Our resolution has 2 separate big categories, and I don't think he really explained it all that well. Treating this as a bed and breakfast, an Airbnb, puts it in a place called conditional use, because there are 4 conditional uses allowed for residential districts. And that's a special treatment. That's an appeal process that can come to the Board of Zoning Appeals. You fit into that. They have to apply for that conditional use. They have to get permission for that. If you classify it as something else, like we did last night, a hotel, that doesn't fit in that section of the code at all. There's no hearing. It's forbidden. So you don't have that right. So when you say, as a staff, that your zoning resolution allows an Airbnb to be the same thing as a bed and breakfast, or what I thought was so cute about the conditional use, a granny house, where my wife and I have our house and we build a house in the back for grandma so she has her own place and her own little kitchen. It's not the same. We thought a bed and breakfast didn't fit that. Bed and breakfast is so clearly defined. We can only deal with the definitions you have in your resolution, and bed and breakfast is owner occupied. And that goes to the heart of all the objections we heard last night. If you have an absentee owner who rents this out for a profit to anybody who will come and spend the weekend or go to a football game, and they're having parties and beer and causing public nuisances, that becomes a problem. Owner-occupied buildings don't have that problem. The owner's got to live there too. So calling an Airbnb distant owner-occupied is so totally different. And for the staff to interpret it as fitting that criteria, for whatever reasons they did, I felt was beyond their authority. The authority for that resides with the Board of Trustees. I didn't feel even we had that authority. And this is just a personal aside comment. Are we being recorded tonight?
Yep.
I don't want to see this in the transcript of the trial, but for whatever reason, and I don't know that Luann manipulated this, but I was the last vote. I would have voted to reject entirely the submission. I would have said, we can't rule on that, it's not in the code. What we did was actually different. Before it got to me, it was 4 votes for hotel. And I went, well, we need to be unanimous if this is going to court. I would have voted just say, we can't deal with this. We reject that interpretation entirely. We modified it to say hotel. I thought that was overstepping our bounds. I think that's your job. That's why I'm so glad to hear tonight that that's what you're doing. You're looking at what you can do with your code. You're looking at amending it. It may take several months. The lawsuit's going to take 6 months to a year to resolve. This is going to work out over time. By the time they get into court, you may have an ordinance that makes the court case moot. Less legal fees involved, perhaps. So I felt that your staff overreached their authority. I didn't think we had that authority that we actually exercised. I think that's your job. I'm glad you're going to be doing it in the ordinary due course. I thought we did the wrong thing. I thought the staff did the wrong thing. The other thought I want to share with you is what we heard last night. I was stunned how much of this is going on. I'm not sure that the person is here now, but probably is. One of our public comments was, I went on the internet, I found an Airbnb operator who operates 13 houses in Symmes Township, our township. One owner operating 13 B&Bs. Well, maybe the rest of us were right last night when they're talking hotel. 13 B&Bs is one absentee owner? Are you kidding me? That needs to be regulated. If you look at what regulation there is, you're not inventing the wheel. The city of Cincinnati has a zoning ordinance for Airbnbs. The city of Columbus has one. Cleveland has one. Small jurisdictions have them, some don't. But it's out there. There's a lot to work with, a lot to write from. City of Cincinnati. You can work with that resolution and work that. What they've done in Cincinnati, number one is they've taxed it. Airbnb excise tax for anybody who's operating one. The revenue from that goes to the city of Cincinnati. Presumably, and I don't know the legalities, there are differences about municipal law for cities and townships. So I don't know the distinction as it would apply here. I'm not your lawyer, and I'm just the amateur at the moment. But maybe there's a tax opportunity there. Not that it needs to be, but there's maybe the opportunity. But it's also about insurance requirements for Airbnbs. It's also about safety and the nuisance to the other neighbors.
Right.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that you guys are going to regulate this. I know there was a public groundswell last night that didn't carry over to today. And I hope some of these people who know more about this and are facing these problems can speak for themselves. But
Right.
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not interested in the tax.
No,
I'm not
we're not-
interested
we
in,
don't want
in the liability. I don't want to police it. So,
Good.
so this is rentals of 1 year or more is what's in this.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Big time.
I've got 2 on my street,
Yeah.
sharing with my neighbor, or I had 2 on my
Yeah.
street. They're both families in those houses, and now I only have 1 on my street
Yeah.
because the property owner said, you might as well buy the house, you've lived here 4 years, so now they own the house. So, yeah, those are long-term,
Yeah.
I mean, they're part of the neighborhood,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of the concern was, I think we were hearing a little bit about that, I think from the attorney or Brian Snyder, was, gee, there was some kind of equating between, I own my house, I sell my house, I move out of town, but I didn't sell the house, I rented it out to somebody, and I'm signing 6-month, 9-month, 12-month leases, and I don't want, this is not, we don't want to take away that right, but we shouldn't be shortening it down to, what do you want to do for the weekend? Well, there's a football game.
Mhm.
And it becomes a public nuisance issue about public safety. What we were hearing, and I don't want to steal somebody else's thunder, but they were talking about Airbnbs have brought into our neighborhoods Lyft drivers and Uber drivers who are lost as to where they're going. They're running over, I don't know if they're running over fire hydrants or what, but knocking over mailboxes and stuff. That's all part of the scheme of that business activity of people coming and going on a very short-term basis.
Right.
So you talk about an Airbnb, I just don't see it. So
Right.
let's let the public who did show up, they're only a fraction of what we heard.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Hello, I'm Mitchell Schott. I was at the meeting last night. I did type something up, but I'm not going to read it.
Can you give us your address for the record?
Oh, it's 10051 Humphrey Road. I have calmed down quite a bit from just the first 15 minutes of this meeting compared to how I left last night. Had a lot of questions going on today, but I am so happy to hear that this is getting addressed. I'm not even going to get into what I prepared, other than the fact that I do have one that is being operated next door to my house now that I learned today from Brian that does not have a conditional use permit. They advertise online that the house can sleep 20-plus guests, can host large gatherings. We've already had a couple issues with it that I'm worried when it does warm up. Of amendment or a conditional use permit or something for these people now, or should I hold off and play dumb until you push through this text amendment that hopefully stops short-term rentals? So that's what I'm kind of confused at right now.
Once we get this done, his neighbor will be sent a letter saying he cannot, no?
Well, no.
That's,
Because he's grandfathered.
any,
Even though he hasn't filed
Conditionally-
the,
no, okay, let me make something really clear.
Yeah,
Nobody has to have a conditional use to do this right now.
okay.
and it's not set by state.
It- The zoning administrator's interpretation that was the subject of the appeal last night wanted to treat them like a bed and breakfast, which would have required a conditional use permit. But that is that's no longer the case, because the BZA disagreed with that and they chose to go a different route, which is within their realm. So if you're a short-term rental right now, you don't have to have a conditional use permit. And if you're a short-term rental right now, and this zoning amendment goes through in a form pretty much like it is now, that would say you're not allowed to have short-term rentals in residence districts, if you're already doing it, you would be considered a legal non-conforming use, and you'd be allowed to continue. We have a whole separate section in our zoning resolution that regulates legal non-conforming uses. And it has some conditions in there that says if you stop doing it for a certain period of time, then you lose your non-conforming status and you're not allowed to start again. If you can't add on to it to make it bigger or more non-conforming. But I just want people to understand that, and that's not unique to short-term rentals. That's just the law in Ohio when it comes to zoning. If you are engaged in a use and then the use is prohibited, you're a legal non-conforming use and you're allowed to continue. So yes, they're grandfathered, to use the sort of.
So we have two parallel tracks. We have, assuming they appeal to the court downtown for existing entities, and then we have our zone, or our text change, which from the moment that is blessed, like approved finally, from that point on, it stops all future activity, right?
In residential districts,
Right.
yes.
Right.
So I would need to wait, really, before I can take any action with you guys or legally, I have to wait for the text resolution to get pushed through, and then I can take action. There's nothing I can do right now.
Because your situation is a grandfathered
Okay.
situation, that
Yeah.
has to wait until this common pleas court
Oh, okay.
is decided, right?
Yeah.
So what do I do besides call the police at 11 o'clock? I mean, that's one of the other things.
You
they
do
have.
that. You do that. You call the police, they
And
enforce
that's
the noise
exactly what,
ordinance, they enforce.
Nobody wants to have to do that, especially in the neighborhood that I live in, the fact that I'm even have to think
I
that I'm going to
understand.
have to call the police over somebody being loud next door. You know, I don't comply. I've hung out outside my back porch and been loud at 11 o'clock, but to have to deal with it on random nights and all that stuff, as you guys, I've heard over and over. So I guess my only recourse really is to call the police when the NORD ordinance is from 11 to 7.
7 a.m.
So at 11:15, if they're blasting music, they're outside hooting and hollering, I can just call the police.
Yes.
And go
Okay.
from there.
Yes.
Okay.
And just jot down notes.
Yeah, I've already got some started. So. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mitch.
Can I follow that up just a second?
Yes.
Because I like our attorney to address it. What I'm hearing is a lot of concern about this grandfathered concept. There's a difference between grandfathered use and public nuisance. And if you're talking about a simple grandfathered use, and they're quiet, not being offensive to the public or the community, they really don't have a lot of complaint for that. They're really not objecting to that. What they're objecting to is the public nuisance element,
Right.
which is a different area of the law and subject to the police power. And it can be it doesn't have to be built into your code, but it can be. If you look, I think it's the Cincinnati ordinance on this. They actually talk about public nuisance issues that happen 3 times in a year and losing your license. And so you can address that aspect of it. And somebody who even grandfathered, it's not about, you're not grandfathered to be a nuisance. You can't be grandfathered to commit a public nuisance.
Right.
So you can take away their use right or police them so that they don't violate that, or they face the music and face the punishment. That's what I wanted to raise, so that you see the difference between simple grandfathering of use and the nuisance element.
Right, I understand.
Who's next?
My name's Kerry Kane. I live at 10120 Meadow Drive, next door to the Airbnb. Last night I presented, when I think it was helpful to the BZA, stats on the number of people that have been there, because the owners tended to be very vague on that, and say, well, we rent it mostly for a week or a month, and we've had like 12 or some renters without any specifics. I've been watching people come and go, and I've got a spreadsheet. There's been 50 different renters over the last 14 months. And since May, there's been 72% or 3.5 days or less. So it's a quick turnover. So hopefully, I made the point last night, but my concern is I'd like to just shut it down. I just don't like the uncertainty of not knowing who's next door. And they think it's just fine that there's different cars in the driveway every week or every other day. And my concern with if you come up with a resolution, I guess the best thing for we property owners would be is if the court upholds the hotel motel designation. Because in that case, as I understand it, then they would be shut down because there's no way for them to continue operating a business in their residential area. Is that true?
Yeah, under the current regulations, yes.
Yes. But I think we need to be prepared for the fact that they're going to appeal that, and some judge down in Hamilton County may have a different opinion and think, well, it's not really a hotel. It needs to be classified as something else. So we need to make sure we write a resolution that says, gee, it is this, we need to regulate it, and if there's more than, that's a very good point, if there's more than X number of complaints or something, you can lose your license or whatever else. We need a way to be able to get them out of there if they become a problem. Because it's just, I mean, and these people are not forthright, okay? They bought the house and moved in, and happened to tell my wife, oh, we're gonna rent it to families. So I thought, okay, you're gonna rent it, like long-term families, something like that. And then I found out by talking to the people walking in for the first rentals that they were renting it for the weekend. And the owners never approached us living next door saying, here's what we're gonna do, here's my phone number, here's my name, if there's ever a problem, call. I had to, months later, ask her, say, hey, if there's a problem, who do I call? Oh, yeah, call me, here's my number. And they've been responsive when I've called, I'll give her that credit. But they're very shady. And she tried to represent it yesterday as something that was rented basically for weeks or months and not that many renters, and it's always families. It's not always families. So we need to make sure we put something in there. Say, I don't know if you can write something in a regulation, say, yeah, you can be grandfathered in if you do it for 2 years or a year or something, or I'd like to say like for 30 seconds, but I don't know, that won't work. But we need something, because I think there's probably, I'm guessing at least a 50-50 shot that the Hamilton County judge is going to disagree with what the BZA did, because they're going to say it's not really a hotel either, even though it matched the description as you read it, matched it pretty closely, I think. I kept calling it, I was surprised when I read the letter from the township people. I said, why didn't they call it a hotel? It's more like a hotel than a bed and breakfast. But so we'd like to see it shut down, and I want to make sure that we do something quickly, because I wake up middle of the night worrying, I got an 85-year-old lady living next door to me on the other side. She's not going to be there forever. God knows I don't want another one of those things popping up next door to me. Every time there's a house that goes for sale in a neighborhood, I get nervous that there's going to be another B&B, because they're making a lot of money at this. This house has been rented for 278 days over the last 14 months, and an average of somewhere between $300 and $400 a day, depending on the time of the year. So that's, their gross income is a 6-digit number. So it's big business, and that's why they bought a second house on Bent Creek, because it is big business. So we need to be able to prevent this from spreading, and then we need to be able to shut down what's already existing somehow.
Can I read the?
Yeah.
So I'll read the text amendment that there are other things in the zoning that we're looking at, but specific to this subject. This says, a dwelling unit or portion thereof which is offered or provided by a guest, by a rental owner or operator for a fee for a term of less than one, that's a short-term rental owner. So shouldn't that say a term not less than 1 year?
No, what it says is a short-term rental
Yes.
is something that's less than 1 year.
Okay. So, and then the next section says short-term rentals. Okay, now I follow you.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you have to do the definition first. I get it. So that's what a short-term rental is. I'll read that again for clarity. A dwelling unit or portion thereof which is offered or provided to a guest by a short-term rental owner or operator for a fee for a term of less than 1 year. Then the next section says, short-term rentals as defined herein shall not be permitted in any residence district, period.
Well, that's fine,
It's-
but as the lawyer says, anything that exists will be allowed to continue to operate.
That's the second, yeah, there's two timelines going on. So this will take care of.
I'll take care of-
2 houses away from you,
Right. We need
because
to
we're going to
do-
get this done as soon as possible.
That'll
That's
shut
why we're
down,
here the day after the zoning appeals.
that'll shut down
Yeah.
new things, but no, we
And then
need
the
to
house
figure out.
next to you is subject to the common pleas court
Lawsuit.
determination.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to do our best to expedite that, but.
Is there anything you can put in your code about, to your point about the nuisance thing?
Yeah, you want me to address that? I can address that. Sort of intimated before, but I want everybody to understand, townships have very different authority to deal with these things than a city. So when you say the city of Cincinnati does it like this, the city of Columbus does it like this, I don't care. Because we don't have not just Symmes Township, but townships don't have the same authority to do things
Right.
the way cities do. So we can only do this through zoning, which is what we're proposing to do. We don't have the authority to permit them and then, tax them. We don't have I know somebody said, well, if they do this too many times, you take their license away. We're not giving licenses for this. There is no license to operate a short-term rental. So we're taking this path on the zoning. We have a nuisance resolution already. We have noise resolutions already. So to the extent that those things already exist and people call the police, then it becomes a law enforcement issue. But we don't have the authority under our zoning power to say, you've had 3 noise complaints in the last year, so now you're shut down. We can't do that. We just don't, townships don't have the authority to do that. We can continue to police it through a law enforcement, and enforce the things that we already have. But I just don't want people, I'm saying this because I don't want people to get the impression that we're going to do this text amendment that's going to stop all the future ones, and then we have something in our back pocket to deal with some of the existing ones. We have a nuisance resolution, we have noise resolutions, we have some tools, but we do not have the authority to then shut them down because they've had too many complaints. That's not within our.
I'm not familiar with that. Does that provide for fines or something? Because it can make it painful for the owners?
I don't think so.
No, our current nuisance regulations are strictly deal with trash, junk, tall weeds, nuisances in that regard.
Yeah.
So if they have tall weeds or grass or junk,
we can send them a notice and they have to clean it up. They have so many days to clean it up. And if they don't clean it up, then we will go in and clean it up and we bill them for the cleanup.
Yeah, so it doesn't do anything for them. The only thing that's going to help me is if the court upholds the hotel motel thing.
Yes.
Otherwise, the people that are next door to me or the crazy people next door to you are going to be there forever until they want to quit doing what they're doing, until they get tired of making money.
Yes.
Which is a shame, because then if it gets, well, it's not been too bad at my house. The way my house is situated, their deck is kind of not in my direct view, but if it were, otherwise I'd be looking about moving.
So that's been going on for how long, next door to you?
They started renting mid-November of 2020. It's been 14 months.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, I think this is the first step in the process, and that's why we're here tonight, to get it going and up and running, so we can get it done as quick as possible. Bill, do you want to make any more comments?
Just kind of to that point, I mean, our law director has given us a timeline per Ohio Revised Code, so we can track this with Kim's help and making sure that we are setting each of these steps absolutely as quick as possible.
Anyone else? Okay.
Do you want me to read the list of the rest of the stuff, or do you guys want to vote?
Do you want to do? I think we should hear the rest.
Okay, I'll go through it real quick. So the other text amendments that we are proposing tonight is under section 137.3, height and area requirements. We are amending the setback requirements for parking areas from 20 feet to 10 feet. We are proposing to amend section 143.2, shared parking, so that shared parking can continue between offices and retail and offices. Under section 4, section 146.1, outdoor lighting, we are proposing to increase the height from 15 feet to 24 feet above the grade for lighting. Section 171, additional use, height and area regulations and exceptions. We are proposing to cross out uncovered porches under section 171.10, and under 171.13, we would like to insert the word deck and insert the word or rear yard under 171.13. For closed or screened porch, deck, or paved terrace may project into a front yard or rear yard for a distance not exceeding 10 feet. Under section 321.4-1, wall signs, we are proposing to add number 3. So it reads, a maximum number of wall signs permitted shall be 1 per building facade. And %, roll and increase it to 50%, and then strike the maximum of 35 square to 75 square feet per side, max of 2 sides. Under section 351, detached garage, storage structures, or other detached structures, we would like to add to this section under section 351.4 and establish maximum number of detached structures permitted. So we are proposing that 1 structure be permitted on 1 acre lots or less, and 2 structures on anything over 1 acre. Section 9 deals with the definition of a short-term rental. We would like to add this section to our code. Section 10, section 51. short-term rentals. Under section 320.4, variable message centers for signs in the O or O district, we would like to add this new section, 320.4, which would allow variable message center signs in the O district, and it would be the same as all of our other variable message centers that we did last summer when we added it to the residence district, but this would only allow for ground signs in that office district, and that is it.
Okay, I want to ask a quick question. I noticed there's two signs up on Montgomery Road, and I know that they were having trouble fixing it. Does that address this in here?
No, I put it in as ground signs because all of our other districts only permit message centers on ground signs.
So does that mean they're not going to be allowed to,
No, they would have to do it as a ground sign with this resolution.
can they come in and, since it's already there?
They would have to go through the BZA to get approval to expand a use that's not, well, it's not a use, it's non-conforming. Message centers are not allowed in an office district, period. So they have a non-conforming use?
Yeah,
Non-conforming-
what they have now is already a non-conforming use, and as long as they want to keep it, they can keep it. But if they want to change to a different one, then it would have to comply with the new regulations. And actually, the current regulations say they can't have one at all. What's being proposed would say that they can have a variable message sign, but it has to be a ground-mounted sign, not on the wall.
Right. So, and it's exactly the same as all the other districts.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so we're at roll call.
Ms. Lees?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye.
Okay, I'm moving, we don't have any executive sessions, so I move to adjourn.
Second?
Roll call?
Ms. Lees?
Aye.
Mr. Beck?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.